You recall last week or last episode I said I liked a challenge, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And you remember the specifics of the challenge I said I liked?
Yes.
Yes. Can I get a package from me to you, the people with the two worst pieces of luck in package delivery in the recent last few months?
And the answer is yes, as long as I am willing to complete the delivery process myself.
Something did not go as planned?
The Postal Service claims that they attempted to deliver it, but no one was available to accept delivery, and there was no secure location at which to leave the package, which I have standing instructions with the post office at my address to leave packages outside the side door.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not supposed to refuse to deliver.
Oh.
First of all. Second of all, I found their claims dubious at the time because they did not leave one of those little "we attempted delivery" slips. I actually didn't know about it until you contacted me and said, "Hey, they said delivery failed."
Right.
And then I went to check their tracking information. Their tracking system was down. And then so I gave them a call, and they said that due to weather and their incompetent customer service, the wait would be over an hour and a half. So I gave up trying to track the package for a little while. And the only, I know if they fail delivery, it's at my post office, and all I have to do is go and pick it up. Unless they decide that they're going to reattempt delivery, in which case I go to get it, and then meanwhile they're failing to deliver it a second time. I did eventually find the slip that they left. It was in a completely different mailbox.
Oh, that's always handy.
Despite the fact that my mailbox is labeled with my apartment number and my name, and you put the right address on there, so she just put it in the wrong one, and so today I made the non-trivial trek to the post office, because my post office is not convenient to get to. Right. And we don't drive.
Sure.
There's plenty of what do you call it? Public transportation here. And the public transportation will get you just about anywhere you need to go in the city, unless that's the post office.
Right.
In which case, so it was a bus to a train to a different train. Yeah, a bus to a train to a different train to get there. And then a bus to a train to a bus to get home.
Right.
At which point, by the way, we just gave up and took a Lyft home.
Ah.
So I've been making a lot of use of the Lyft service, by the way.
Have you?
Yeah, it's like Uber, only not terrible.
Oh.
And I've been very, very happy with it.
Well, that's good.
And they also seem to take really good care of their drivers. Their drivers are all happy. So anyway, long story short is I now have this rather heavy box in my possession that I have not yet opened because I have been told that it is a birthday present.
Right.
And as of today, technically it is not my birthday.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you permission. You can open it today.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Otherwise, I can save it.
No, open it today.
But I guess we're all waiting. Listening, it is technically my birthday.
Right. It is past, in fact.
Yeah, it is a 2 weeks minus 1 day after my birthday.
You've done the math already.
Yeah. Ooh.
Okay.
And oh wow, somebody went all out. There's like an elaborate order and return information inside. Amazon has decided that I might not like this, and they have included. Is this their gift wrapping service?
Yes, that is.
Wow, it's very nice.
It's not like I had them send it to me and then I gift wrap it and then send it back to them so they could send it to you.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes more sense then. So actually, you didn't get the package from you to me. You got it from Or you had Amazon do it. So I'm going to take a picture of this just so that you can see their wrapping. Because it's actually wrapped in this actually neat little gift sack.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. And there's a very nice little note there. Which is between you and I, but I've got to tell you, I have not been called that nickname since I made those videos to get me through college.
I know. It's amazing what a little bit of research will get you.
Well, I'm sure the pictures are all still on the internet somewhere.
Probably.
Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, 19th edition.
Yes.
Wow. This looks awesome.
That's because it is.
Why? Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable has been much loved for its wit and wisdom since 1870. Yeah. This iconic reference book will take you on a captivating adventure through its unique blend of language, culture, myth, and legend. The latest edition, edited by Susie Dent, includes an intriguing supplement of Brewer's gems, facts, fables, and curiosities from past Brewer collections.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow, Oh, look at this.
Uh-huh.
This is fantastic. What made you suspect that I might actually be interested in this?
Well, it dawned on me. It dawned on me because I had been thinking about what can I get him for his birthday, you know? And it finally dawned on me the other day as I was going through our script on gloves. That wait a minute. This would be great if we included, information from brewers on these little sayings and phrases and whatnot.
Yeah, this is actually fantastic because I feel like I could almost open to a random page and just at least have the start of an episode. Abaddon.
Go ahead, read it out.
Abaddon, from the Hebrew Avadon, meaning destruction. The angel of the bottomless pit, Revelation 9:11. In rabbinical literature, the word is used for hell. Milton used the name for the pit itself. In all her gates, Abaddon ruse thy bold attempt. That's from Paradise Regained.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very... Abba! Oh, that's not what I thought it was.
Yeah. It's a little different.
Abracadabra is in here.
Mm-hmm.
Abominable Snowman. This is just like everything you've ever heard.
Sure.
I feel like this is not the sort of book they mean for you to read from cover to cover, and yet I have a feeling that eventually that's going to happen.
Well, I certainly did.
Did you really?
Yes. Admittedly, I have a slightly different version than you. Mine's an earlier edition, and its foreword is by Terry Pratchett.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I just turned to Labyrinth.
Mm-hmm.
It does not mention the Labyrinth-Labrys connection.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
There's always more to know.
I'll have to write to this brewer person.
he's a little dead, but go ahead.
Yeah, a little dead means mostly alive, so
right.
At least Pawnee, Anglo-Indian word for water. Okay.
I figure there's at least one episode on every page.
Yeah, there really is.
But hopefully you'll enjoy that and have a good time with it, and it will enhance your research.
Oh, yeah. Because that's what I need. I need to do more research. Quidditch is in here.
I figure this will help direct the research. So there's not quite so many dead ends that you have to chase down.
Ouch, that hurts.
Well, no, I'm just assuming...
Are you saying my scripts are full of dead ends?
No. I'm saying that in any given research, there are a number of dead ends that occur because you chase something down, it turns out not to be anything, right?
Yeah, okay. I get you now. Wow. Okay, this is fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
All right, and now I got to put it aside. Otherwise, I'm going to end up just reading it through the whole episode.
Yep. Otherwise, that's the end.
If I fade and start sound like I'm not listening anymore, it's because I've gone back to reading.
All right, man. Well, I'm
You have
glad you
given
like
me
it.
a very dangerous gift, sir.
Yes. The gift of information.
A little knowledge, they say, is a dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this seems to have a little knowledge on every topic, so...
Yes. But not as
So
dangerous as a whole lot of stupidity.
I don't know.
I like that the guy who originally wrote it way back when, the first edition, his name is Dr. Ebenezer Cobham Brewer.
Sounds like a D&D NPC.
Yeah. He does. But no, that should stand you in good stead, sir.
It certainly will.
If listeners would also like an opportunity to take a crack at getting one of those, I will put a link in the show notes as usual. Brilliant stuff. I'm glad you like it. Everything will be wonderful from here on out, right?
Bald-faced stag.
We've lost him, folks. He's gone.
Balderdash! Nonsense, rubbish. The earliest recorded meaning of the word in the 16th century is frothy water. Its origin is uncertain. Bamboozle! Oh, I am going to have fun with this. You know, actually, there's a running joke in my family that I am not allowed to touch the almanac.
Oh.
Which, do people even know what an almanac is anymore?
I don't know. I know what an almanac is, and I know it was my father who explained what an almanac was to me, and I'm assuming up until maybe 15, 20 years ago, people knew what an almanac was, just as a natural part of their, informational intake.
See, every year at Christmas, my father would be presented with the yearly almanac and book of facts, or World Book of Facts. What is it?
Yeah.
You know the one I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
The almanac.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the World Almanac and Book of Facts. So, and I would also present my aunt with one because they loved having them.
Right.
And invariably, at some point, I would pick it up because of my love for trivia and minutia.
Right.
And would start leafing through it to just random pages and reading the facts out loud until somebody finally wrestled it away from me.
Oh.
I'd just be sitting there and then hey, did you know the average rainfall in the Amazon River Basin is, yada, yada, yada.
Were you one of those people or one of those families where when you got a game of Trivial Pursuit, you threw the board into pieces away and just read the questions to each other?
No. Sadly, I was going to say my family does not have the same love of trivia that I do, but in truth, my father does, and he instilled it in me. So I can't really say that, but no, we were not a big Trivial Pursuit family, honestly.
See, we
were more a Monopoly family. Actually, that's not one of the earliest board games I remember playing with my family. Because we were whenever there was like a power failure or something, you would play it. The old board game Dungeon?
Yeah.
We would play that.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So I was very happy to snatch up the re-release when TSR re-released it a few years ago.
Oh, cool.
And it's actually a very faithful adaptation with just a few little cleanups to where you don't have to spend all your time setting down all the cards in the rooms.
Mm-hmm.
They just have little tokens to indicate that the room has been looted out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
that's not
anyway. But yeah, we used to play that, and we also used to play a board game of my mother's. This was when I got a little older. It was a game called Intern.
Oh?
Yeah. It's not really too well known, and she had it for many years. And basically, each player takes on the role of a doctor in one of 4 specialties. I think medical, surgical, neurology and OBGYN.
Right.
And it plays sort of like, I guess Monopoly is the closest thing, because you're trying to land on spaces so that you can admit patients.
Uh-huh.
And once you've admitted a patient, you have to collect a diagnosis and a treatment card for that patient. And so, like the patient will be presenting with, certain conditions, and then there are generally 2 diagnosis cards and 2 treatment cards for each patient, so that you can diagnose them with a particular illness, and then you can treat them and discharge them. But there's also rules that allow your patients to die for unlucky die rolls. So recently, when Tiny and I went back to visit my family, we broke it out.
Right.
And my mother and I and she were playing it. And Tiny here, had the worst die rolls I have ever seen in my life. She killed every patient she came near. And then started landing on other people's spaces and other people's patients. And killing them too. She just became like Dr. Death through this game. And the worst part was, I was the OBGYN. I have one patient. There's one patient in the game that is absolutely, completely normal and uncomplicated. It is a patient, it's a 9-month pregnant woman. She is presenting as in labor. She has absolutely no complications. Nothing is wrong. The diagnosis card for her is basically she's giving birth, and the treatment card is basically catch. And as long as you can pull those 3 cards, she's like the easiest patient in the world. So of course, Dr. Death lands on my pregnant mother. That was the point at which the game. She got very disheartened at that point. That was a very upsetting turn of events, and that was kind of the end of Intern for the night.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. The thing with us in Trivial Pursuit was we had to stop playing Trivial Pursuit as a game for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which was that my father never got a question wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the second reason was that we could not play with the relatives. Because, see, what happened initially, my aunt and uncle on my dad's side, they got Trivial Pursuit, when it first came out years and years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they invited us over for, playing Trivial Pursuit night. And it basically went like this. They would ask Dad a question. Dad would answer said question. And then my aunt, who was a school teacher, would look at him and go, "There's no way you could possibly know that." And she just sort of became increasingly upset as the evening wore on, as she failed to answer questions and Dad would just within seconds answer whatever was presented to him. We stopped playing Trivial Pursuit shortly thereafter. There was one particularly bad session where I was allowed to ask a question of my aunt, and she insisted that she be given as much time as necessary to think up the answer.
Uh-huh.
At which point, after about 5 minutes, I got tired of waiting and just told her what it was.
Right. There's a certain point where you just don't know the answer. It's not going to come to you.
That's when everything pretty much ended. Yeah, we didn't play with anybody else after that. And I have to say, as the editions wore on of Trivial Pursuit, and new editions came out and all that kind of stuff, I got to be pretty much the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Because, especially the Star Wars one, that was the Star Wars set of Trivial Pursuit, there was nobody that could keep up with me on it.
Yeah.
It's like,
let's see. In our family, let's see, it was like nobody would ever play Scrabble with me.
Right.
Even though I have the worst luck with board games, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so Scrabble, yes, I have an excellent vocabulary, and I'm very good at like looking at a pile of letters and placing them. I just never have the collection of letters.
Right.
You know? And I think I made that joke one night in the Word of the Week chat.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, everybody else would be spelling out this stuff, and I would manage to spell a 6-letter word that only used like E's and A's, so it was worth no points at all.
Right.
But and the game that we were not allowed to play in my household anymore was, and this is because of me and my father being very competitive, was Risk.
Oh.
Risk was banned from our family, and apparently, Tiny had a similar experience with her family and friends, because she also is exceedingly competitive, it turns out, despite seeming so tiny and innocent.
Right.
To the point where one of the first discussions we had when we realized that we were falling into a relationship was that we will absolutely never, ever have Risk in our house.
Right.
Because it's the one thing we're not sure that we could survive.
I feel like that's just a general all-around good principle for any married couple.
Right? There will be no risk.
Married couple, dating, first dates, no risk, nothing.
Yeah, no politics, no religion, no risk.
That's right.
No world conquest of any kind, really.
You've got to have these limits.
And apropos of nothing, I'm just curious now, have you ever played a game called Geek Out?
No.
That is a fun little board game that I have on my shelf that I never have enough people to play.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's basically, it's a trivia game, but it's based on all sorts of geeky stuff. So it's got categories like games, comics, sci-fi, fantasy, and I think miscellaneous is the last category.
Oh, that could be dangerous.
Yeah. And the idea is that as a player, you pick a card and you roll a die and you get a random subject. And then the subject will be presented like, in comics, it might be Marvel superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then each person goes around the table bidding how many valid answers they can give. Like, I can name 10 Marvel superheroes.
Right.
Or whatever. And then the next person can either upbid them or not until everybody but one person drops out. And then that person actually has to name however many of whatever they claimed they could.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Boy, if you knew a lot of obscure ones, you could spend hours just answering that question.
Yeah.
Because everybody would have to verify.
Well, I mean, hopefully it's just a nice friendly game where there's a certain point where you just, you really do know a lot about comics. There probably is a character. And see, my feeling on it with board games like that is if you really are sitting around a table with a group of friends playing a trivia game and you are cheating, the win is obviously more important to you than it is to me.
Right.
If you feel it's that necessary to win that you have to cheat, this is like, I'm just going to let you have it. Though I also, despite the Risk story from earlier, my competitiveness has dropped immensely over the years, mainly because I got older and realized that there's more important things in life than winning at board games.
No, there's not. What are you talking about? No.
I have one friend who I will not name out of respect for him, because he is a very close friend of mine. But for a while, me and my group of friends, we all decided to get into Magic the Gathering, where you just buy everybody buys a starter deck, and you just play with those against each other every so often, and that was like the beginning and the end of it. Or occasionally you could buy a booster pack or whatever. Right. There is an episode of the show Adventure Time about basically about Magic the Gathering, and about one person who plays it. It's the dog, Jake the dog, and he is so competitive and insufferable and nitpicky and rules lawyery that everybody has stopped playing with him. And everybody now claims that they no longer play the game and then just play in secret with each other. That was this friend of mine. And he actually had sort of a moment of revelation because one of our other friends showed him that Adventure Time episode.
Mm.
And he got that look on his face, and he turns and he looks over at her and he's like, is that me? So he's in a much better place now.
Oh, good.
But, you know.
I'm so glad to hear it.
But yeah, my line has become, there's not a cash prize, you know?
Yes, there is. You don't understand Monopoly. Oh, there's always a cash prize. Oh dear. No, yeah. I've, you know, in my early bad years, I was not a good winner or a good loser.
Mm-hmm.
I never lost. I have to say that I never lost anything. Because what would happen is I would lose interest in a game about halfway through if it looked like I was going to lose.
And I retire undefeated.
That's
Goodbye.
Right. That's right. That was about 8 or 9 years old. You know, it's like, oh, this looks like it's not going well. I'm kind of done. I don't want to play anymore. Bye. See you guys later.
Yep.
But you learn as you grow older how to behave like a human being.
Sometimes you do.
Yeah.
I know some people who did not.
Yeah, some people it takes longer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah,
I guess there's still time.
Admittedly, they might need a reincarnation or two, but yeah, you know, you can learn.
Actually, that is part of the Hindu circle of karma, right? There is
right.
the realm of competitive ghosts who
right.
people will not play board games with anymore, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After you're reincarnated from the Praetus realm, the next is the over competitive ghosts.
Right. They don't even play each other. They're not allowed to do that.
If I knew Hindi, that I could have made a great joke there that nobody would have gotten.
Yeah, that's the essence of great jokes is that nobody else can get them.
Nobody gets them.
I've learned that over the years. If nobody understands your joke, it's perfect.
That's why I keep that storehouse of accounting and philosophy jokes.
Ambassador Leslie wrote in by email. That would be digressionsanddragons@gmail.com. She says, in light of your interest in the Fantasy Flight Games Genesys RPG, Mr. Scott, I am curious as to your opinions on the FFG narrative dice destiny point system specifically. You have previously expressed a distaste for inspiration in 5e, perhaps more as a missed opportunity, as well as discussed a desire to maintain narrative control at your gaming table, and the destiny points, or whatever they're calling it in Genesys, smacks a bit of inspiration, players taking control for their benefit.
Remind me in brief what the destiny points do in FFG, in Star Wars. Basically, you have a pool of a pool of force points, right, that are light on one side and dark on the other, and a player can flip one over from light to dark to take some sort of a benefit, and you can flip one over from dark to light to impose some sort of penalty. Is that correct?
That's the very, very bare bones basics, yes.
Yeah, okay. See, honestly, I'm sorry, I don't remember all these systems.
No, that's fine.
I actually don't have a problem with that specifically in Star Wars,
mm-hmm.
because the Force and the will of the Force, as weighing on the world itself, is something that is an established part of that world, you know. Right. And you can even see, like, in the first Star Wars movie, Luke he specifically takes actions to let the Force control him. Like, mm-hmm. the most iconic example is when he turns off his targeting computer to represent that he is giving over to the will of the Force, that he's basically acquired faith and realized the importance of that, accepting fate in his life. So, and I'm fine with that because it's a part of the universe. And I actually don't have a problem with like those sorts of mechanics in role-playing games in general, to the point where I actually just rewrote the 5e inspiration system again for use in my personal campaign. Because I do like the idea of characters being able to invoke deep traits to represent that something is emotionally important to their character. You know, and I even actually also, based on a conversation with one of the players, wrote in a system of a character arc, whereby each character has a flaw that can negatively impact them. And sometime before the last event of the campaign, there will be a scene or an adventure or encounter or whatever that will throw that flaw into sharp relief so that the character has an opportunity to overcome it or leave it behind or whatever. And after that, they can then take inspiration as often as they can take it, instead of being limited to like once a session or whatever. Because it represents them overcoming their flaw. Right, you know, that whole, the third act thing, where the character is at their darkest point, and then instead of going to the bottle, they pour the alcohol down the sink and throw it away, and they go out to do what needs to be done.
Right.
You know, where they're no longer being held back by their flaw. I wanted that character arc moment in the game, and I wanted a mechanic that would help players do it. When I start to get annoyed with these mechanics, like for example in Fate, it's when the mechanics encourage the players to not think like their characters, but instead think like authors who are trying to tell stories about their characters. Or where the mechanic only has a very loose connection to the universe or the actions being taken. And I mean, I'll take D&D 5th edition as a perfect example. If you gain inspiration and inspiration is generally awarded in D&D 5e by, you know, doing something that is in keeping with your character's personality. Which, personally, I find that a ridiculous thing to reward anyway, because that's what you're supposed to be doing. You know, that's like rewarding someone in Monopoly for rolling the dice at the start of their turn to see how far they move. It's just part of the game.
Right.
And if they get inspiration, they can at any time trade the inspiration in for a bonus on a die roll, or give someone else a bonus on the die roll, and the die roll they're doing that to, or the person they're doing it to, has no connection to the action, whatever it was they did that was in keeping with their personality. And that's where I get annoyed, because the inspiration just becomes like this nebulous point of bonusness that's not, that you can just throw at a die roll, and that's not something that the character would do. You know what I mean? It's like, so, you know, in the game, I get into a fight with a king because one of my personality traits is that I hate authority figures. And even though we need help from this king, I can't hold it back, and I insult him and whatever, and yada yada yada, we get screwed. So the GM gives me inspiration because I played my character. Fine and dandy. That part of the mechanic works fine. 2 sessions later, I'm in a fight with a goblin, and I keep missing against the goblin. So I'm like, I'm going to spend that inspiration that I got from yelling at the king to hit this goblin to make sure I hit. It's like, well, what the hell does that have to do with anything? How is that connected to your character in any way? And that's where I have the problem, is when these points are just like nebulous nothings that the players decide to throw on dice rolls because they want a good die roll. If instead, you know, the player had to use the inspiration in a situation that was tied to one of their personality traits, like you know, like the party is trying to get past a soldier, and he decides to intimidate the soldier. Then, because he hates authority figures, now he'll throw that bonus in there because he's channeling that hatred of authority figures into really shoving this guy around and making this guy miserable, right? But when it's just, here's a point, spend it on whatever, or give it to another player for whatever, that's when it all falls apart to me, because it loses all connection to the character and the action.
So you don't have a problem with it as long as it's appropriate for whatever the, what do I want to say, genre, milieu, blah, 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 is? Like, it's okay in Star Wars because Star Wars has the Force and the Force does weird things.
If the characters can know in some way that that point is being spent on a die roll, either because the character hates authority and now he's beating up an authority figure, or because the Force is a thing and we know that the Force is pushing us toward our destinies, so that even though your character might not say in that moment, okay, obviously I'm calling on the Force, but when things work out okay, despite, the worst of circumstances, the characters could turn to each other and say, well, I guess the Force was on our side that time. There's something in the story that mechanic can connect to at every point. And that's why I'm okay with it. I'm not okay with it when it either drives players to make decisions that don't make sense in the world, or when it's just a mechanic.
Okay.
So
correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole inspiration thing in D&D 5e is not well explained in terms of how you're supposed to use it.
You know what? It was a complete afterthought. There's a better explanation for it in the Dungeon Master's Guide, because they had 3 months to figure out a better explanation for it, and they had to fill pages in that DMG.
Right.
But I'm fairly sure that inspiration was just thrown in at the very lastest of last possible minutes. And it was because, well, we need to have a role-playing mechanic because it is a role-playing game, and we don't want people coming back and, like they said with 4E, that there's no role-playing in the game. I really think that it was encouraged by something like that, because it is such... The problem is the inspiration system, as I demonstrated, because I wrote an article that was basically 11 alternative ways to use the D&D inspiration system better. So the fact that a blogger, a glorified blogger, could sit there and rattle off 11 better versions of the same mechanic that didn't require substantial mechanical changes, that tells me that the professional game designers who were coming up with it were phoning it in. And that's actually one of the system I'm using now, apart from the character arc business, is one of the ones that I wrote in that article that had just been modified and updated a bit.
So one of the interesting pieces of Leslie's question, I think, is as it relates specifically to Genesys. Okay, you remember last episode we went through and I listed off all the various what did they call them? Tropes, yes. Tropes. Yeah, the tropes and the settings and whatnot that you could run in Genesys that they had examples for and whatnot.
Right.
It seems to me that not all of them would avail themselves of a destiny system or destiny point system or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And yet, and I still haven't read the book very closely, and yet I think that is in the core set of rules. It's not an optional add-in. I mean, of course, as a GM, you can do whatever you want. You can take it out or leave it in or whatever. But I'm just wondering, would you, what, okay, say like we're doing hard sci-fi, right? How do you think a destiny point system would fit into that?
It wouldn't. Literally, hard science fiction is, I mean, in hard science fiction, one of the most important things is that science conquers all. Rationalism conquers all. the idea that there is some sort of nebulous destiny out there pushing people towards something, that it just doesn't fit. Which isn't necessarily to say that that some sort of role-playing, I hate to call it a role-playing system, but there's no better term for it. It's not to say that some role-playing mechanic wouldn't fit in, especially one that was more character-focused, something like Inspiration, where, each character has a has a drive or a motive or an ideal or something that somehow drives the mechanic. But that's on a more personal level. The idea of like a destiny pool in a hard sci-fi game, I would not do that.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I can hear you thinking about it.
Well, no, I mean, there are things I could do with it, but they would then be very, very specific. Mm-hmm. Okay, like, take one of these, like, I hate to reference Star Trek Voyager of all things because, God.
Right.
But, Species 4572, or whatever the hell it was called.
Right.
It was an extra-dimensional species from a biological organism, or from Species 8472. They were an extra-dimensional species from a biological universe that was invading our universe. And I could envision a world where a similar sort of extra-dimensional threat from a universe where the laws of physics were different. In a game like that, I could have some sort of dice pool that would work as a chaos pool, representing the fact that you like the laws of probability themselves are being affected by this invasion or something like that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that then becomes a very, very specific mechanic. And now I'm in the boat of finding an excuse to have the mechanic instead of having a thing in the universe and saying, oh, this needs a mechanic, I could use this mechanic. And I think that's the wrong way to work. And I still think in hard sci-fi, it would be a hard sell for me.
Okay. What about like, as a means of representing, that sudden flash of insight for scientific discovery?
That would depend heavily on how it's implemented.
Mm-hmm.
And also, again, the game would have to be really, really focused on... Like, it has to represent something core to the game.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure. We're all research scientists.
Yeah, okay. Then, like that flash of insight thing, fine. I could see that as an excuse. Though it would still kind of rub me the wrong way, even in that kind of a system, because... there's sort of this, so there's this pool of insight? What is this, a platonic reality here? Which, again, if you were playing it, if you made that a feature of the universe, then fine. But there comes a certain point where you're adding mechanic just to add a mechanic.
So your lesson would be to consider very carefully whether something like inspiration or destiny points or whatever belong in the game that you're playing. And if there's a really good reason to have them in there, not just because, they're part of the rules.
It has to be more than just a mechanic. It has to represent something in the world that the characters could conceivably understand in some way. Even if it's only a vague, squishy, like understanding the Force kind of a way. The Force moves in mysterious ways and we all have a destiny. There has to be something that the characters can understand in that mechanic to justify it existing in the universe. Otherwise, it's just dice mechanics. Other than just don't call it anything, just call it the bonus pool. Here's a pool of bonuses. When you need a bonus from the bonus pool, you can take a bonus from the bonus pool. But then it'll go away and turn into a penalty, and then the GM can draw a penalty from the bonus pool. but that'll turn it back into a bonus. I mean, at that point, if you could literally change nothing about the game world by calling it the bonus, then it doesn't belong in your game. And that's the problem with a generic system like that. Offered as a tool, offered as, hey, here's one of a bunch of mechanics you might use in specific games when it works. I'm okay with it in a generic system like Genesys. But offered as a feature of the system so that it is, like, by default, it exists in every campaign, I'm less happy about it.
There's kind of an unasked question in the first part of her question.
Okay.
To you, which is, in games where Destiny or Inspiration or whatever has been put in and made to make sense and all that kind of stuff, do you consider it as being a opportunity for players to take control for their own benefit, or do you consider it as being more of an outcome of the actions they've taken up to that point?
I'm okay with it either way.
Yeah.
Okay, and I mean, again, I'll go back to the inspiration system I'm using, where at any time a player can say, hey, this is in keeping with my personality. I want a bonus for this. You know?
Okay.
Like I said, I mean, they have a certain wellspring of drive that has to be recovered, which is the role that vices play, by the way.
Right.
You know, that's how they restore themselves, is basically for every moment of great strength, there will be in the future a moment of weakness that recovers their strength. Yeah, I mean, I realize it's a little bit more mechanical and abstract than you might think, but it at least connects to the way people actually behave.
Mm-hmm.
But I would expect, like, here's the thing: if a player is given a mechanic that they can take advantage of, I would expect them to take advantage of it for their benefit. I would certainly never expect a player to, take a penalty. Like I offer a mechanic that can give them penalty. It's like, whenever you want, you can take this penalty because you think it's appropriate. I wouldn't ask a player to do that, because no character would, of their own free will, just decide to voluntarily hurt themselves or weaken themselves without some trade-off or ulterior motive or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know people make bad decisions in moments of weakness. Okay? But generally those things are either because people think they're making good decisions and it actually works out to be bad in the end, or they're not really making that decision so much as not resisting it. And those sorts of things are things that the GM would impose. Like, hey, you're a drug addict. If you can't make this saving throw, you need your drugs. Okay, that's where that sort of mechanic should live. I would never expect a player to voluntarily give into weakness like that, because then I'm asking the player to make decisions that to be motivated differently than their character would be motivated. No drug addict wants to be a drug addict. No drug addict is happy being a drug addict. They're a drug addict because they are weak, or they are dealing with something, or because they're an addict. They made a mistake at one point and now they can't overcome it.
Sure.
So it's not so much that they make those choices as they are unable to make the good choice. They just can't overcome it. I kind of got off the topic, but long story short is, if there is a decision I want a player to make, I'm damn well going to make sure that they get a benefit from that choice. Otherwise, it would be stupid to even expect the player to make the choice. Yes, they are playing a character, but they're also playing a game. And if I'm gonna need them to make bad choices, if I'm gonna need to have them have moments of weakness, I need to create a mechanic that will basically force those moments of weakness on them or allow them to trade something. You know, when I don't want to use drug addicts and alcoholics anymore because that's a little bit.
Right.
Let's say you have like a minor obsessive quirk, right? Like you always have to tidy up, or you have weird superstitions, like you have to, you have to do certain things, or you'll bring bad luck on yourself. Okay, those generally come from a lack of sense of control of the world. They're a way of you imposing control on the world, right?
Right.
So, when your character is feeling out of control, you would succumb to those things. And in return, when you choose to succumb to one of those things, then I would give you sense of control points, which you could then use to inspire actions that are particularly important to you, which are connected to your character in some way. Right? So that's the trade-off for taking a penalty. It makes sense in the world. It explains your character's decisions. It puts your motives in parallel with the characters. That is, you as the player, you make this choice because you want control points because they're valuable. And the player or the character unconsciously makes that choice because they need to feel like they're in control of their life again. So you're setting up all these motives in parallel. You're not asking players to make decisions to hurt themselves without there being some benefit. And that benefit somehow matches the benefit that the character unconsciously or consciously is getting in the world from doing the same thing.
Okay.
Does any of that make sense, or am I just babbling
No.
now?
No. That's fine. All right. Part 2 of Leslie's question.
Oh, God, that was just part 1?
That's why I kind of suspected this was going to be a lengthy answer.
Yeah. Oh, this one's directed at you. All right. Ambassador Leslie in email writes, also, Mr. Brian, you have spent plenty of time within the world of the narrative dice. How do you tend to make use of the Destiny pool? As inspiration style, as in the dice upgrades, or more narratively, like introducing new elements into the scene at hand to thwart or aid the party? Well, Mr. Brian, how do you make use of the Destiny pool?
You're not going to like this answer.
Oh, probably not.
Probably not. I use it in whatever way seems appropriate for the situation at hand.
Actually, that's a fine answer. It just seems like a little bit of a cop-out because you didn't actually answer.
I know. It's terrible, isn't it? See, okay, the way the Destiny pool works is it's supposed to be a thing that is more or less constantly in use. Mm-hmm. Okay? Players are flipping light side dice to the dark side, or light side pips to the dark side so that you can, so that they can get an advantage or have something interesting happen or introduce a new fact to the game or the world or whatever, something like that. It's there to handle all those weird extra circumstances or whatever that don't really have a specific rule. Like if you walk into a cantina, right, and you're looking for a contact of some sort, but you don't know who that contact is or what they're supposed to look like or anything like that, you could flip a light side point to a dark side and say, oh, it's going to turn out to be my second cousin twice removed. And sure enough, that's what it'll be.
Okay.
So maybe because of that, you get a little advantage with your negotiation with the contact over price and that kind of stuff. Not huge, not like, they just totally give in to whatever it is you want. Right.
They are just your second cousin twice removed.
Right.
They probably don't even know what that means.
Yeah, probably not. But it gives you a small advantage. So I might give you a boost die, all right, which is a 6-sider with a couple of beneficial symbols on it and mostly blank other sides. Mm-hmm. Okay? So then you make a pool with that die in it and you've got a small chance of getting a good result. All right, that kind of thing. So that is actually kind of both the things you're asking about. It's introducing a new element and getting a dice upgrade.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a little bit of both, and that's just kind of how it works. So they've flipped a light side to a dark side. Now you, as the GM, you have a dark side point to use if you didn't already, and in most cases you do. But anyway, the point is you now have another one, and so it might be that you use that right away. Like I could flip it right back, or flip a nut. Actually, I can't flip that one right back, but I could, if I had a second one, I could flip it right back and say, yes, but he's on the outs with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then that might negate the small bonus or whatever, or introduce a deeper complication, or, you know, a harder die roll. The other thing you can do is, much like your players can do with dark side points, is you can introduce things to the scene that wasn't there already. You know, information or characters or whatever. Or you can just straight up make die rolls harder. You can say, sure, that looks easy enough with your 1 yellow and 3, or 1 yellow and 2 greens, which is your skill and your characteristic dice. You know, that looks easy enough, but you know what? This guy is going to turn out to be a little tougher than you think. So I'm going to upgrade one of his opposing dice to like from purple to red. Yeah. Okay.
From bad to worse.
From bad to worse.
We only have to speak vaguely.
Right. I know. From bad to worse. So, and then that makes that roll harder. And it's a give and take, because by flipping that dark side point to a light side, they now have another light side point that they can use at some point. And you just keep going like this. And the idea is that these things constantly seesaw back and forth. In Star Wars, the number of dice and what side they're on is determined by a roll of the force dice. Everybody rolls a force dice for everybody, and you get to put a couple of pips in, either light side, dark side, or some combination.
Okay, I have some follow-up questions here.
Please do.
Because you're right, I don't like certain aspects of your answer.
Okay.
Which is fine, we can still be friends.
Oh, all right.
Yes, even if you run games wrong, you can still be friends.
Okay, sure.
Okay. So, first of all, you said that as a GM, you can use the dark side to add an element to a scene.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, maybe I have been GMing wrong, but I have always felt that it was my job to add elements to a scene, and I have never needed permission from the mechanics.
Sure.
Like you could just have reinforcements show up.
Yes, you absolutely can.
Right.
But this is more along the lines of, I guess one way you could use it would be to say, you know, if you've constructed a scene and say it's a really super easy fight, like way easier than it should be. Okay. Because there's, you know, as we've pointed out, there's a balance between, you know, easy encounters, medium encounters, hard encounters, and there should be a variety of those in the game, you know, whatever. But say like it's way too easy, right?
Right.
You could conceivably flip a dark side point to a light side point in the middle of combat or whatever to introduce a new complication. Mm-hmm. Like maybe a stray shot bursts a gas main or something, and now the area is flooding with gas or whatever. It wasn't necessarily something you constructed in the scene itself, but it's something that would be reasonable to be there as a consequence of other things. Okay. You know?
But like something like adjusting the difficulty of an encounter that is too weak. I mean, again, isn't that sort of your job anyway?
Right.
And if you didn't have any dark side points available at that point, which rare, but it could conceivably happen.
It could.
Then are you just like, well, I would really like to fix this because the players are getting bored with this scene, but I don't have the points, so
no, you're not restricted really.
So then
it's a convenient explanation if you have to improvise in the middle of something.
Okay.
That's really what it is. It's a convenient explanation if you have to improvise in the middle of a scene.
So what it really is it's showing the players that you're improvising to screw them.
Yes, exactly. No, it's okay. I know you know what I'm talking about, but
I sort of do. But I have to be snarky.
Yes, I know.
But there is also a certain point where it sort of comes down to that. If you can add elements to a scene to adjust the challenge of the scene or whatever freely because that's your job as a GM, or you can also add elements of a scene to adjust the difficulty because there's this dice or there's this mechanic that says you can do that sometimes. What is the difference between one and the other? And every time you improvise, should you, if there are dark side points available, spend them out of fairness? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of do, but I need to point out that, see, what can happen is that the dice pool, if it's not being used in the way it's an intent, or not the dice pool, but the destiny point pool, if it's not being used in the way intended, what can happen is that one side or the other runs out of points that they can use. Okay, because if the players choose to sit on all their light side points,
right,
and you as the GM are flipping dark side points, then you can run out of dark side points, and then you have none to use when you generally do need to up a challenge or to just to provide an effect of some sort. Okay,
right,
all right. And the reverse can happen as well. If the GM decides to sit on his dark side points, pretty soon the players are out of light side points.
Right.
And they don't have an opportunity to influence things as they should, So really, you as a GM, in fairness, are looking for opportunities to flip those dark side points back to light side points.
Okay.
All right. In order to keep the pool running. And I don't know that this is necessarily strictly within the rules, but what I do is I will flip one and say, oh, that conduit burst, and now there's sparks going everywhere in this water, that kind of stuff.
Right. And I imagine that you fiddling with the destiny pool frequently reminds the players that it's there.
Yes.
So that they can then take advantage of it.
Right.
So you know what? To that extent, it's almost like your use of the destiny pool as a GM is just it's almost like you're not really using it for anything other than so that the players can see you using it.
Right.
Because you could do everything, like when you set difficulty for a challenge. Assuming it's not like, an attack roll, is based like on range or whatever, right? It's one,
right,
or whatever. But if it's like, oh, I'm going to try and hack that astromech. That's a thing Star Wars is doing.
Yes, that is a thing Star Wars is do.
Okay. I'm going to try and hack that astromech, and you can just say as a GM, well, that's 2 difficulty dice because that's just how difficult I've decided it is.
Sure.
Or you could say, well, it's 1 difficulty die, but Darth Snarky really is influencing things, and I flip over this destiny point. Now it's 2.
Right.
2 challenge dice.
Exactly.
And the only reason to do that is so that the players see you fiddling with the destiny pool.
To a certain extent,
Supply them with points so that they can then use them and don't forget to use them.
Right.
That's fair. See, I actually accept that answer better than any other explanation for it.
Right. But it was asked how I use it. So, that's how I use it,
I understand that.
Yeah.
So now, but okay, here I have another question though. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that the player walks in, they're looking for their contact, and they can flip over a light side point into a dark side point and say, oh, well, it's my second cousin twice removed. What a weird coincidence.
Right.
And then you can then flip over the light side or the dark side point right back and say, yeah, but he is the black sheep of the family and fell in with the Empire, and he doesn't like you now.
Right.
Right? Well, can a player then flip it back?
No.
And be like, oh, yeah, well, it doesn't matter because I know his dirty little secret about what he got up to at summer camp on Tatooine that one time, and I can use that as leverage.
Yeah. No, for 2 reasons, that's a no. One, you can't flip the same destiny point that has just been flipped.
Could they flip another destiny point to do that?
They could if they had one, and if the rules allowed you to spend more than 1 destiny point on a scene.
Okay. All right. I was just because you could get into the situation of, I brought my force field dog, and I brought my dinosaur that eats force field dogs.
Yeah. I brought the grenades. Now I brought a bazooka, and
Well, I have a bazooka shield. Quaping.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. No, that is
infinity +1.
That is not within the rules to do that.
But as a GM, you can you can veto an action just by flipping the thing right back and turning that around and saying, it sucks for you, actually.
Only if I have a okay. So they flip a destiny point, right? From light to dark.
Right.
I cannot use that same destiny point and flip it back on them. I have to have another different destiny point available to me to use.
Okay.
See, the thing is that there are a variety of things they can do with the destiny point that don't necessarily change the scene as well. They could use it to recover strain. They could use it to, all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah. But, do extra damage, boost dice, stuff like that. Right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's literally there to represent in Star Wars the way the Force works, which is sometimes arbitrary, sometimes in your favor, sometimes not.
But ultimately, always it sort of balances out.
Correct.
Always two there are. One Sith and one Jedi. Yeah. And if ever there's too many Jedi, along comes Anakin to collapse the Republic.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
They're like, he's going to restore balance to the Force.
I know.
They realize the Force was not balanced in their favor at that point?
Here's genius Yoda, and he totally misses it. I mean, it's right there in front of him. Gosh, look how many Jedi are sitting in this room. I wonder how many Sith there are.
Just two. Wait a minute.
It's like, come on. No, anyway, So in my head, Destiny Pool makes sense in Star Wars. Okay.
Yeah.
Much like you, it's because it represents the Force, right?
And I totally agree with you. And I'll be completely honest. Even I wouldn't so much necessarily like it to literally conjure elements of a scene out of thin air.
Right.
There happens to be a speeder sled bike thing, whatever they drive. Right over there, and the guy left the keys in the photon ignition.
Sure. Yeah.
But stuff like that where a stray shot ruptures a plasma conduit, that's more a Star Trek thing, isn't that?
Well, whatever. Yeah.
But stuff like that, I'm totally okay with. And even then, if the players did want to suggest a prior relationship with an NPC, I would even be on board with that kind of a thing. Is it?
Yeah.
Because again, it literally represents that, hey, it's funny how things work out sometimes, doesn't it? Only with sort of a mind of its own behind it.
Which is one of the things that is an additional point of curiosity for me about Genesys, is that I want to see what the suggestions are for making a similar mechanic fit within these various genres they have laid out.
Yeah. It would be interesting.
Because I can understand, in the Tyranoth setting, that it could represent something about magic, or, depending on how you set up the background of the world, it might represent the influences of the gods or the, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, see, that's sort of the where I was coming at. It was if I were going to do a Destiny point system in something like D&D, it would be either fate, as a general rule of the universe, or else the gods, as a whole, as a unit, or else one of those fundamental forces like order versus chaos. Something, basically something that could be tied basically to alignment without necessarily being it's good versus evil and the universe prefers good to evil.
Sure.
But order versus chaos would work there.
There has to be some balance that you're playing with.
Yeah, it could even be something as simple as, like, if you look at the Greek gods, and you know, like, especially in the old Harryhausen stuff, where they were basically playing chess with people, you know, that is almost a perfect place for that kind of a thing, because basically those points, as they flip back and forth, they represent the mood of the gods. It's like, oh yeah, they're with you this time, or yeah, oh no, they just want to see you get screwed a little. Oh, they're testing you. That's what it is. You know, when really it's just like one of the gods got drunk. Is like, oh, you know what? We'll just Hydra. Yeah. How about Hydra? They can take a Hydra.
Yeah.
You know. You know, the war god gets mad and throws all the pieces off the board. You know, in fact. It would be really... Imagine if you had... Okay, now I'm going crazy here.
Okay.
So you have, let's say, some random number of gods. Let's say 5. Because 5 is the perfect number for gods, right?
Sure.
In the center of the table, you have tokens representing each of those 5 gods. Okay, there's a war god token, and like a wisdom god token, and a luck god token, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one side is, you know, brightly colored and happy, and the other side is darkly colored and miserable. And just like with Destiny points, they flip when you invoke them or when the GM invokes them. But the actual effect they have on the game is in some way tied to which god is in that mood.
Yeah.
So like,
okay.
So if you did it like, and if it was like a mythology story where everybody is to some extent a cleric, where they can all call on the gods for some kind of miracles, you know, like just pray to the gods, then there could be an interaction mechanic right there with just flipping the coins. Like, you know, your fighter is Perseus, you know, the demigod, and most of the gods want to see him succeed, but every so often they want to take him down a peg, or they don't want him to get too prideful or whatever. And sometimes the war god is just annoyed, and sometimes the war god likes him, and that's when the wisdom god decides not to like him just to spite the war god and stuff. So basically there's these 5 capricious gods who are constantly either on your side or against you, and every time they have an influence in the game, their mood shifts. That would be a fun core for a mythology game.
That would. Like
if you want to do like Greek mythology.
So I sent you a link to the Gamer Concepts website at gamerconcepts.com.
Oh, because we are contractually obligated to discuss it.
We are. It's true.
And what? Oh, it is that shirt.
It is that shirt. I remembered.
I love this shirt. I genuinely do want this shirt.
Excellent.
This isometric illustration of basically 3 layers of a dungeon with a cute little eye demon at the bottom because it is legally distinct from a beholder.
Do you see the little waterfall on the left, falling on a D20?
D20 statue? Yes, that is very cool. That was really the shirt that convinced me. I'm like, I like their stuff. Yes, I am happy to talk about it because I would genuinely buy this. Dungeon Levels shirt. A wonderful illustration of all the traps and beasties encountered in your run-of-the-mill dungeon.
Nice. If you would like that shirt and want to check it out, head over to gamerconcepts.com and tell them we sent you.
So we frequently talk about the video games that we have been playing.
Yes, we do.
And I have started replaying. I actually was on a little bit of a kick where I was replaying a bunch of old turn-based RPGs, and I replayed Final Fantasy VI.
Right.
Or 3 for people like me who grew up with a Super Nintendo.
Oh, all right.
And then discovered that a really, really nice HD remake of Final Fantasy IX was available for sale on the PlayStation Store.
Ooh.
Final Fantasy IX, which, or as I like to call it, the best one.
Ah.
Even though I know that that's going to make a lot of people twitchy for saying that.
Well, that's obviously why you like it.
Yes. I only like it for spite purposes.
You hipster.
Hey. I was liking things until the moment they became mainstream before it was cool, okay?
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough.
So, and the reason I bring it up is because I was actually playing it right before we started recording tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent an hour in this game riding around on a flightless bird in a small forest, digging for treasure.
Okay.
Random treasure. And the random treasure that you frequently dig up is treasure maps that will lead you to treasure in the wider world. It's entirely an optional mini-game.
So your treasure is treasure that leads you to treasure.
Correct. It's treasureception.
Okay.
It's several layers of treasure.
Right.
It's a lot more compelling than that, but I don't want to get into this whole long...
God, I hope so.
Okay. Well, one of the... So you... Now I'm going to get into it, because there is a neat aspect of it.
All right.
So these birds, the Final Fantasy mascots called chocobos, they're basically giant riding ostriches. And they've been in the series since, I don't know. I don't know how long. They weren't in the first game, but I think after that they were in like all of them. But you meet one in this little forest that it calls home, and there's all this treasure buried in its forest, and it digs in the ground for treasure. And you find the treasure by playing sort of a hot and cold game where you have it poke its head in the ground, and based on the noise it makes, you know how close you are to treasure. And so you try to pinpoint the treasure. And most of the stuff you dig up is just consumable items and healing potions and the usual junk. But every so often, they discover this ancient tablet. And the ancient tablet has a picture of a location in the world and a vague clue as to where that location is. So you might have just a picture of the world map. Not the world map, but of the actual world, which will show this place where two mountains come together. And it'll say, hey, there's this place near a dying forest. And if you figure out where that thing is in the world and go to that location, you can dig up a substantial treasure. So there's sort of like a scavenger hunty riddle clue thing. It pays off on exploration and all that stuff. It's actually a compelling little game. The hot and cold game where you have to actually dig up the treasure is not the most compelling part of it.
Okay.
But it's at least it pays off frequently enough. And when it doesn't pay off, it still pays off because you're finding stuff you'll use in the game.
Right.
So, you could sit there and play it, unless you're obsessive like me, and we'll just sit there for an hour straight and play it. But it's basically a mini game, right? And there came a point in role-playing games, in computer or video game role-playing games, where mini games became like all the rage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure it started with Final Fantasy, but like even in the Dragon Quest games, like Dragon Quest 2 had the slot machine, right?
Right.
Dragon Quest 3 had the monster arenas, and by the time you get to Dragon Quest 7, there's full-fledged freaking casinos in the game.
Yeah, casinos and board games and poker and fashion contests and I don't know what else. All kinds of things.
And these are all what we'd call mini games.
Mm-hmm.
Because you basically stop playing the game to engage in this other game that is not necessarily necessary to proceed in the game. Sometimes they are, but mostly they're not. And they use completely different mechanics from the rest of the game. Whatever you're doing in the rest of the game, you're not doing during this mini game.
Right. Let's stop saving the world and go play poker.
Right, exactly. And they got really bad for like Final Fantasy got really bad with them because they started including the collectible card. You know what else too? Remember Witcher 3? You played a little bit of Witcher 3, right?
Yes.
You get to the tavern at one point and suddenly this guy is sitting there playing basically Magic the Gathering.
Yes.
And they want you to go while you're, trying to stop a war between two kingdoms and also prevent the supernatural undead ice zombies from taking control of all of the magic in the world and kidnapping your adopted daughter. You're also supposed to run around and build a magic deck and play magic with random peasants.
Right.
Right? And Final Fantasy does a bunch of that. Like, they love the stupid card game. It started in Final Fantasy VIII, and Final Fantasy IX has this ridiculously complex, stupid card game that you just play with random people. And you're supposed to collect cards and build good deck, or, build a good pile of useful cards and play it. And, frankly, I find it ridiculous anyway. The whole a collectible card game, the only reason it works is because of modern marketing, distribution, and publishing.
Right.
Okay, there is no way a collectible card game could fly in a pre-industrial fantasy world. Unless there really is like a god of marketing, and the ninth school of magic is random booster packs.
There was a couple of games in the old Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. There were 2 different card games, as I recall. Yeah. And it was literally
Sabacc, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And then I can't remember the other one.
Fizbin.
Yeah,
that's the Star Trek game.
Wrong. I don't know how I feel about them. They always seem more annoying to me than they do actually fun.
Right?
Because if you want to be a completionist, and I know some of us on this podcast do, that means that you then have to basically, in addition to trying to solve the main story or deal with the main story and deal with like character side quests and things like that, and a variety of other things that are actually related to doing the game. If you want to be a completionist, you then have to,
relevant, we'll say.
Yes. You then have to stop down and go try to play cards with every stumblebum you meet in the entire game and try to get their card off of them or whatever the case may be.
Right, precisely.
And it's just, it's an annoyance. It's not something I enjoy.
But in my defense, I will say here that I am not a completionist. I am not like an orthodox completionist. Mm-hmm. I am a reform completionist or a rational completionist.
Okay.
If I start playing if there's a side quest in a game, and after trying it out for a little while, if it is compelling enough to me, or at least not annoying enough to me to drive me crazy, and I can also see that it is reasonable that I could complete it without driving myself to frustration, then I am a completionist. But I can also very easily dismiss, I did not play Gwent in Witcher. Because my actual response was, when the first NPC sits you down and says, let me explain this card game to you, I looked at the card game and the rules and I played the tutorial game and then I say, oh, it's one of those.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nope. Done.
Yeah.
And the same with the Final Fantasy one. I'm like, nope. Done.
Racing games crop up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. If I wanted to play a racing game, I think I'd have bought a racing game.
Well, that was like the Final Fantasy VII Chocobo-related side quest minigame. Was this horrible, horrible game of giant riding ostrich husbandry. Not only were you participating in chocobo races, which, by the way, you could actually set them to automatic, so you didn't actually have to play the race, which some might argue is actually the fun part of the process. But your job was actually to gather the best breeding stock and then watch them make baby chocobos. And there was this very, very complicated, fantasy genetics that had to be used to breed the right colors and qualities of birds to unlock all the best stuff in the game. And I had, at that point again, being a reform completionist, no thank you. I do not need these rewards. As in Arkham Asylum, I was very happy to get all the Riddler trophies. In Arkham City, after seeing what it would take to get 2 of the Riddler trophies, and that there were hundreds of them, I'm like, no, I don't need them this time around.
There's only one mini game I find more annoying than either the racing or the card games.
Mm-hmm.
That's the crafting mini game.
Oh, some of those are fun.
I disagree.
Well, okay. But this sort of brings me around to my point, though.
Okay.
Sort of my point. I have 2 points, and I didn't know how to deal with this, so I have 2 points. Point 1 is this. So I'm sitting here and I've been playing this game, and I've been pissing and moaning about the stupid card game and how terrible it is, and I don't understand why they include it. And I don't know, why do they keep doing these mini games? And yet, I sat for an hour, triangulating treasure locations on my ostrich so that I could go find the treasure in the world. So, whatever your particular preference is, obviously, there are good mini games and bad mini games for any given person.
Sure.
Right? Okay. And, part of me wanted to talk about the question of what makes a good mini game in a video game, and part of me wants what makes a bad mini game in a video game. But then I remembered something else. And I was curious if you have ever had this experience. Have you ever had a GM, or even a player, try to bring, poker or some other game into D&D? Where they get into a poker game, and now the GM actually has everybody put their character sheets aside and play a few hands of poker to play out the poker game.
Yes.
And you laughed very evilly.
Yes, that has happened. It's not a good thing. I know it might seem like fun because every GM at some point goes, oh, it'd be really fun. It'd be really great if we all actually played poker here in the bar. And that's wrong. It's not really great.
No, it's not fun.
That is once again not the game I signed up to play. But we
all do go through that in our brains, right?
Yeah, there's at least once that you actually do it. You don't just think about it, you actually do it. At least once. And then at some point, I hope you realize what the problem with that is.
Can I share my shame with this story, though?
You may.
It wasn't poker for me.
Oh, what was it?
Okay. You have read The Myth Adventures of Oz and Skeeve, right?
I absolutely have. Oh, God. You didn't.
In the book Little Myth Marker,
yes,
they spell out the hands of dragon poker. And also, if you pay very careful attention to the final dragon poker tournament in the book, you can actually see the deal order and how the cards are dealt. And so I was able to, without the rigmarole of conditional modifiers, which I'm not even going to talk about, I was able to bring dragon poker to my D&D group.
And how did that turn out for you?
They did not care for it. They were not interested in stopping the game of Dungeons & Dragons, because that's ultimately what it is. It's stopping the game of Dungeons & Dragons to play poker. It is not, let's have an exciting poker tournament scene.
No.
It is, stop playing Dungeons & Dragons to play poker.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of problems with that, and I feel like not the least of which of them is the fact that it is you playing the poker and not your character.
Right.
But by the same token, it's hard to say, okay, we're going to play poker now, everybody roll a die.
Yeah. I mean,
that's as big a disconnect as the other.
Right. So you do end up in this weird situation, because there are all sorts of situations where there is a temptation to use a mini game. Like every GM has also had the village fair, where there's going to be like an archery competition and like a bardicness competition and a be the best cleric competition or whatever. You know, there's going to be like a joust and a melee and all those other things. You know, like the medieval tournament, right?
Right.
And there is a certain point where just playing it out as an action resolution, like, okay, everybody roll a die and whoever rolls the best die wins. There is a point where you do want to inject something to bring that little mini game to life in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there is sort of an argument to be made for mini games in D&D and role-playing games, is there not?
There is.
Uh-huh.
but I feel like it's one that should be ignored. Ah, man, I don't know. I mean, you talk about like archery competitions and stuff, and you give everybody little Nerf guns and set targets up. It's still just them doing it, not their characters.
Well, okay, hold on a second. When I say mini game here, it doesn't necessarily have to be you're doing the thing that the characters are doing.
Uh-huh.
But what I mean is that like there are some mechanics where an actual game of some kind is played out to mirror. You know what? I'll give you a really good example.
Okay.
Do you remember the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition players option rules?
Not especially, no.
Okay. Well, there were a series of 4 books that basically drastically overcomplicated the game of Dungeons & Dragons because TSR was trying everything to not go bankrupt at that point.
Uh-huh.
And they felt that what D&D needed was more complexity in the core rules.
Okay.
And one of them was Combat and Tactics, which basically rewrote the combat engine for Dungeons & Dragons. And we later learned, a few years later, we learned that it was actually them testing the 3rd edition combat engine. Because a lot of the stuff that was in there actually turned out to be the 3rd edition combat system. But one of the interesting little optional rules in the back was dueling rules or fencing rules.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where the 2 participants in the duel, they actually had this little grid of body locations. You basically high, middle, and low, and then left, right, up, and down. And they could choose a particular style of attack and a particular style of defense and the positions that they were going to attack and defend from. And then you were trying to read your opponent. And there was actually a mechanic even for reading your opponent, where if you rolled a die to read your opponent, you would learn one of the things they were going to do in the next round and then could adjust one of your own moves to accordingly. But there was this entire little dueling minigame that I thought was absolutely awesome. I still think it's absolutely awesome. And nobody ever liked it when I used it. And I don't understand.
Dueling, party of one. Dueling, party of one.
You can't duel by yourself, though. That's
no,
the thing.
You can't.
It doesn't work without someone else. And because it's based on, like, making hidden choices and then revealing them, like, you can't even play against yourself because half the time you know what you're doing.
Yeah, about half the time.
Yeah, that's about right, in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, have you ever seen, like, a well-done mini-game or mini-mechanic?
I cannot say that I have. Maybe I'm the wrong person to ask this question to, because I find anything that distracts me from the main core of the game to be an annoyance that I would rather not do.
Okay, fair enough. But
and if something in one of those requires me to do it because it has some essential piece, like the fashion show in Dragon Quest 6, whatever it is, where they had a key piece I needed to complete the quest, the main quest, so I was forced to do it. That aggravates me. I don't want to. I have no interest in a fashion contest.
Because you didn't choose to play the fashion contest video game. There is a game of fashion contests out there, I'm sure.
Correct, yes.
You chose to play the fantasy adventure role-playing game.
That's right. And that's my point. I didn't I didn't sign up to play poker. I didn't sign up to go to the races with my little goose. I didn't sign up to play a board game in the middle of my adventure. I didn't sign up to do, whatever else is in there. Play poker, run the slots, anything like that.
Okay, but, like, getting back to tabletop role-playing games, though, like, you couldn't see a case for... Like, I realize here that the distinction between minigame would be a little bit fuzzier in a role-playing game because it would be a structural mechanic that is specifically designed for a specific type of scene. Like, imagine, like, let's say in Star Wars you want to do a pod race, right? Pod racing was a Star Wars,
right?
Right. Okay, so you would need, like, as a GM, if you wanted to have a pod race, and you wanted the players to actually participate in the pod race, you would need to figure out a few things. Obviously, you know, you would need some sort of tracking for position, and you would need some types of actions they could take to give the players something to grab onto, so that they're not just saying, well, I go as fast as I can, because, you know, otherwise that's just what everybody is doing every round, you know. But you would build a mechanic, you know, some sort of what I would call a structure to make that scene playable.
Okay, yeah, all right. It's funny you picked that, because then that triggered a memory. There's actually a Star Wars, FFG Star Wars adventure that more or less revolves around a race, which does have some of its own specific mechanics, because the ship rules don't really handle a race structure.
Right.
So the problem is, I know it's there, and I know I've read through it, but I've never actually played it or used it. I just haven't had the opportunity to do so. And I know they're fond of introducing little sub-mechanics and subsystems, basically. And maybe that's the distinction I need to make, the difference between a subsystem and a minigame.
Maybe. I mean, like I said, I realized that the line would be fuzzy.
Yeah. But
okay, because, I mean, the other problem with translating this stuff to tabletop role-playing games is that nothing the players do at a tabletop role-playing game is a distraction from the game. Like, obviously, if they're talking about movies or dicking around or doing nothing,
right,
then that's a distraction from the game. But what I mean is, if they decide to go try to win a noble over by getting him into a poker game, even if that's not what you had planned, and they just came up with that plan,
right,
that's still not a distraction from the game.
No, that would be part of the game. Right.
But all of the sudden now you have something that can't be resolved with the mechanics of the game. You need a different set of mechanics. I'm not saying necessarily play poker.
Right.
Though realistically you could, and you could use die rolls to stack the deck. Or, let players draw discard a card and draw a new card if they're really good at poker, or let them have two hands to represent how good they are at poker. They get, they could have two chances to win. You can do stuff like that.
Yeah. Use social tests to improve their odds and that kind of stuff, to read the other player or that kind of thing. But yeah, I get the point you're making. There needs to be, because there's nothing in the rules that says this is how you play poker in our game.
Right.
Although I also then have to point out that in fact FFG Star Wars has got rules for how to play a game in those supplements or those adventures where a game is a particular focus.
Right. Which in that case, just like you as the GM, some adventure writer came up with that system.
Right.
The only difference is if you're writing the adventure, well, you're coming up with the system. You're developing the rules for pod racing or sabacc or Fizbin.
Right.
What is Fizbin? It's something, isn't it?
Star Trek.
Oh my God, the fake card game.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Fake card game. It's like Calvin Ball for card games.
Well, right.
Totally made up. Rules changing at a moment.
Kirk was making it up as he went to...
For Oxmix.
Yeah.
Where they went to Gangster Planet.
Right, and then the other, like, Spock was playing along or whatever. And
Yeah.
like, oh, clearly I have a full rummy, which is the best hand.
Right.
Yeah.
As long as it keeps the characters, or keeps the players in character and in the game, I guess I don't mind it so much.
Mm-hmm.
But if it pulls the players out of their characters and out of the game proper to do something else, I feel like that's a bad thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, fair enough. But because, like I said, this all started because I realized that I was playing a minigame and enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I had actually stopped playing the game to play this minigame.
Yeah.
You know.
I can't think of any mini game I've ever played in a video game that I enjoyed. Mm-hmm. And I certainly can't think of any game played by the players in a tabletop RPG that I enjoyed. But I guess there must be some occasions where I have partaken in, if not outright enjoyed, I don't know. I have partaken in without minding some sort of subsystem or sub-game system in an RPG while I'm playing it.
Yeah, and I guess it feels more organic when it happens in a role-playing game for precisely the reason of...
Yeah. I know a friend of mine made up a system of rules using FFG Star Wars to play what's called Hutball, which is some crazy mix of football, soccer, and rugby in the Star Wars universe. It's an actual game in the Star Wars The Old Republic MMO.
Why is it called Hutball, though?
Because it's devised by Hutts, played for Hutts, and...
but presumably not played by Hutts.
No.
Right.
It's like me inventing a sport, charging people to partake in it, and calling it Brian Ball.
Okay. Fair enough.
But anyway, he wanted to emulate that in the RPG. So he sat down and he broke it out and figured out some rules that would work to emulate it on the tabletop. And I guess it was pretty good. Mm-hmm. I seem to remember having enjoyed the 2 or 3 times I got to play test it. So I guess maybe that's one I can think of. But again, that wasn't... it was kind of part of an adventure, but it was the focus of the adventure.
Right. And it would sort of have to be anyway, right. Because at that point, for a complex system like a Hutball, you would the players have to learn these rules. At least some of them. They have to learn enough of the rules to understand what can and can't be done and the chances of success for stuff. They don't have to learn all the rules, obviously, because that's why you're there. Right. But they do have to learn enough of the rules, which means you kind of have to stop and explain, okay, guys, now as we go to the Hutball scene, let me explain to you how this is going to work. Mm-hmm. And now you're teaching them a board game.
Right.
Right.
I don't know. It's interesting. I would like to see, and I'm not kidding about this, I would like to see someone on either the DM's Guild or Drive Through RPG get to work on a set of games you can play using the systems that already exist within the RPGs that they're going to design for.
So basically, you build on the action resolution mechanic, whatever it is.
Yep.
And then everything else you add is just basically structure.
Right, because I could see somebody coming up with a book for 5th edition, for D&D 5th edition, that is just, here's how you can do poker in 5th edition without breaking the RPG, without having to stop playing the RPG. Mm-hmm. And then doing the same with things like blackjack or, tiddlywinks or, whatever you want to do. Find 10 games or so that people would occasionally want to do, maybe play darts, that kind of stuff. And I could see that being kind of a chore, but not a huge chore to come up with. And then people could use that to incorporate those kinds of games more organically. That's the word I want. Organically into the experience of playing the RPG.
Okay. So now, well, actually, like my mind is starting to already think about poker specifically.
Sure.
Because obviously you would have a round structure, because poker is played out in rounds. And then what you would really need to define is the actions that particular players could take. Like die rolls would represent the actual cards. Okay, whatever the cards are going to be dealt with, that comes down to the die rolls that resolve the game. Right?
Right.
But so like you would just need to basically tell a player in some vague way whether they have a strong hand, a very strong hand, a weak hand, a very weak hand, or an average hand.
Right.
Right? And there would need to be a mechanic that evolves each hand each turn. Because as cards are being dealt, the hand changes. Right? And then the players would need to basically the actual actions they take would be abstracted strategic actions. Like they would I'm going to try and get everybody to drop out or bluff, I'm going to bluff.
Right.
Or I'm going to wait it out. Where I'm not going to play aggressively. I'm just going to sit here and see how it plays out for a round. I'm not going to drop out of the round, or I'm going to drop out of the round, or I'm going to push my luck as hard as I can. And then the way you have those interact and have people use things like their insight and deception to resolve bluffing and reading people. Like I could see a system for building a poker mechanic within D&D that builds off the action resolution mechanic.
Right.
But,
which I feel like is what it kind of has to do for whatever RPG you're playing. It has to build off mechanics that already exist, not introduce totally new ones. It's like those QuickTime events in video games that are not about QuickTime events.
Right. Where the game has 3 QuickTime events total throughout the entire course of the 9-hour game, and you have no warning that it's coming. All of a sudden, there's just like an X flashing on the screen. It's like, what am I supposed to do with that? Oh, hit it. Sorry, game over.
Yeah. 17 times.
So now here's a question though on top of that. Okay, because we talk about I thought a lot about subsystems that D&D lacks. Okay. Well, I mean, one of them is people are always clamoring for mass combat. Some people, they want to be able to have large scale combats in their D&D game. At some point, they want to have the Battle of Helm's Deep. Which is totally fine. It fits the genre. I totally would understand why that would fit. And I also totally understand that is something that has to operate above the action resolution system. Because at that point, the players would be, to some extent, actually stepping out of their roles as characters to play a larger role as, basically taking, so that you don't have to assume that, okay, now each character in the party takes control, is taking command of a battalion or whatever, right? You could literally let the players take control of different units on the battlefield and just say, okay, now you're not your characters. Now you're the commanders of this battle. There's nothing wrong with that, of shifting the characters temporarily out of that and then letting them play it out. But would that constitute a minigame? Even if you do keep it in the characters, like each character takes, the wizard in the party takes control of, the fourth wizard battalion, the battle mage battalion or whatever.
Yes, I think that is a minigame.
Okay. But that's also one that would kind of fit. Right?
Yeah.
Or I'm thinking about, because I'm doing a campaign that's going to take a lot of place on the ocean, And at some point, the question of naval combat is going to come up.
As it does.
Right? Because, well, I do have pirates. So, you know. So there is going to be naval combat, and I also see a potential for siege warfare at some point.
Okay.
And so these are things that I'm not related to the pirates. Okay. It's a separate situation from the pirates.
Okay.
Okay. Right. The pirates are not going to dig in and starve out.
Although that would be kind of interesting. Like the characters are out in a ship and they get surrounded by pirates who won't let them leave a specific area until they're totally out of supplies and wrecked. Oh,
that is, yeah. Or like the pirates just like harry them. Like whenever they try to land, the pirates cut them off.
Yeah.
So that they can sail wherever they want to go, but the pirates are just on them.
Yeah.
And there's a few pirate ships so that, you know, one can always sail off and resupply itself and then come back. And like they could literally just, wow, that is neat and brutal.
Yeah, you're welcome, Angry's players.
But, you know, like I'm going to have naval combat. And 5th edition didn't bother.
Right.
They promised us stuff like this. They said, oh, we're going to have all these rules modules for all these different things. And they don't.
Yeah.
But you know, like at some point you kind of want them. You know, my players actually want a ship.
Sure.
It's one of the things that as soon as I said, hey, what if we did like a, you know, sailing on the ocean? They're like, oh, we could get a ship. It's like, of course, you know, they want a ship. That would be cool. But now at some point, they've got to do something with that ship other than just using it as a teleporter between this location and that location.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, you know, it's not just a fast travel system.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
there are some situations in which a sort of mini game would be appropriate within the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then comes the mystery of what makes a good one from a bad one.
Well, as stated, anything that takes you out of your character is probably bad.
But then I'm going to point back at the mass combat.
Yeah, but that doesn't. I mean, yes, it does, but no, it doesn't.
Right.
Because it's still your character controlling a battalion or whatever.
Well, what if but like I said, what if we don't try to contrive it so that it's your characters? What if, you know, like what if the players, while their characters are waiting out this battle in the castle, they have hired an army. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They are not taking direct control. They are not on the battlefield. They are not giving individual orders. They have hired this army to act on their behalf.
Right.
Would it then still be appropriate to allow the players to play out the mass combat system, each in control of their mercenary unit? Yeah, right?
Is there a facility for me to hire these mercenaries or whatever and just turn them loose to do their own thing without having to command them?
Well, sure.
Then I feel like you're probably on safer ground in terms of minigame, not minigame. I mean, obviously you're going to need some special rules, okay?
Well,
but I don't know.
But what if the players want to play the mass combat?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Depending on what the player likes, they can either play the mass combat or they can be off gathering intelligence or whatever, you know?
Okay, but now let's say that like 3 of the players want to participate in the mass combat. And one of the players is like, I don't care for this.
Yeah, one of the players...
Does he stay home that day?
No, because a good GM is flexible. I don't have a good answer.
Depends heavily on their age. I'm not 25 anymore. I just don't have that hip flexibility.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for you.
No, I guess there's really no good. It's always going to come down to the table. But
yeah,
I do think there is a place for, like, as much as I said earlier when we were arguing about destiny points and all of that garbage, that I don't want the players stepping out of their characters' minds and having different motivations. At the same time, I'm totally okay with letting the players take control of other things in the world, even if their characters don't have direct control. Like I said, that you hired this group of mercenaries. Mm-hmm. They're going to go out and fight this war for you. Right? And you're not, like, only one person in the party may be qualified to command an army. So they're not going to go out with the army and command the army. They're just going to say, I actually feel like if you as the GM, like, so the players, they go out, they spend 10,000 gold pieces hiring this army, equipping them, they spend all that time, and then they send them out to go to the war, and then you as the GM, you go behind your screen, you roll a die, and then you say, I'm sorry, your mercenaries are all killed. You lose. Like, you know, at that point, this is a really weird situation suddenly in my head where in order to preserve the concept of player agency, you almost have to be willing to let them take control of something other than their characters.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I think that that's not really the big problem.
Okay.
I don't think. Yeah, I think you can do that. You can let them control, a battalion or issue orders to a battalion, and you will have a special set of rules for doing that, and it will be, I guess, like a mini game, and that's going to have to be okay.
Right, and it would be a little war game that you play out at the table.
Right.
Which and obviously if your players are not into, like, I almost feel like if you were going to write this, let's say you were hypothetically writing an RPG,
mm-hmm.
and you wanted to include the possibility of mass combat, and you didn't necessarily want the player characters to have to be in direct control on the battlefield.
Right.
So you sort of have to allow this abstract of the players can now be this unit. They're in command of this particular unit or these several units or whatever. Okay? But I also feel like to do it right in your rule book, you would also have to have a simplified resolution system to play it all out in one turn with the players making a couple of die rolls. This actually isn't that ridiculous. I mean, It might seem ridiculous nowadays, but remember, like the original D&D white box, it said, and when you have to play out these big battles, use the chainmail rules. Which was the mass combat fantasy rules that led to D&D.
Second edition D&D, I think it was second edition AD&D, whatever. Wasn't there a set of combat battle rules?
There were multiple.
a box set, though. A box set. Let me look. Hang on. I've got it here.
Was it the battle system miniatures rules?
Okay. It is the official Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Battle System Fantasy Combat Supplement.
Which was then revised into the battle system miniatures rules. Which was then a modification of those was included in the combat and tactics rules that I referenced earlier. So there have been multiple mass combat systems for AD&D 2nd edition.
Yep, it's all about armies and battles and fully compatible with any official AD&D or D&D game, spell, monster, or plane of existence, no matter how obscure. There's a Dragonlance Adventures battle in there. Allows use of field artillery, flying, magic, invisibility, and illusion.
Neat.
Yeah, command armies, fight as individual heroes.
Did you ever use it? Was it any good?
No. This was acquired long after I had played AD&D. But I know I acquired it in hopes that I would eventually be able to use it, and it never panned out.
But see, everybody wants to crack that nut.
Yeah.
Just like everybody wants the naval combat. Everybody wants to... The minute you get an airship, you want to have an airship combat.
Yeah, you want to do airship combat.
You want to have airship combat with a dragon. Because who wouldn't want to do that? That's awesome.
Because I'm looking at these sheets and like, oh, that's probably going to be way more complicated than I could get anybody to take an interest in.
And that's really what it all comes down to, isn't it? It's finding the right balance of rules that are, because they cannot be more complicated than the RPG itself.
No,
that's
can't.
Number one. It has to be more approachable.
Yeah.
Number two, it also has to be close enough to the mechanics of the game. You can't invent a whole new set of mechanics, which you already observed.
Yeah.
It's got to build on that. So,
and that looks like that's exactly what this is an entirely separate set of rules.
Right.
That just happen to have D&D plastered on it and some passing similarity to D&D, and that's not sufficient.
No, that's not going to work. What was the 3E book? There was a 3E miniatures and war combat book, and the only reason I remember it is because it introduced the most fantastic miniature ever, which was the War Ape. Which is it's basically a monkey with these two huge, it's an ape. I shouldn't call it a monkey. With the spiked gauntlets.
Yeah. It's
I have a link to a picture of the.
Yep. I have I have that book as well.
What is that book called?
Okay, hang on. It is the very cleverly titled Miniatures Handbook.
Miniatures Handbook. Yep.
Thank you.
Just got
Good. I'm so glad I went to do that for you. But you know why this exists, this Miniatures Handbook?
To sell miniatures.
No. I mean, yes, but no. This exists because when WotC had Star Wars RPG and Dungeons and Dragons RPG, they produced 2 miniatures games.
Right.
Okay, one for Star Wars and one for D&D. But they didn't integrate with their systems at all. Naturally. Right. But the miniatures were pretty decent, so you had people buying the miniatures and whatnot just to use in their game, right? In their table, in their RPG. And there were interesting things going on the miniatures that were not replicated within the RPG itself. So this handbook was basically for the people who liked those miniatures and then needed the rules to represent the things that the miniatures could do. Yes. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. I got this book not because I played the D&D miniatures game, but I got it because I liked some of the options in the character classes and whatnot. Like there are favored soul, healer, martial, and war mage. Those are the base classes in here, and then the prestige classes are like bonded summoner, dragon samurai, havoc mage, skull clan hunter, tactical soldier, war hulk, and war chief. And some of those were interesting, and I wanted to goof around with them. If I recall, the Marshal evolved into the 4th edition Warlord, right? I think you're probably not far off, frankly. Which was, frankly, I gotta say, one of my favorite classes, and one of the classes I wish had come back, was the darned Warlord. Yeah. I really liked the idea of a non-magical combat leader. A commander character. And I realized that they did roll a lot of the mechanics into the fighter. But, come on, you can make 7 different wizards. We can have wizards and warlocks and sorcerers and bards, but I can't get the one other different fighter. Yeah. I was always, if there was anything I liked in 4E, and there was very little, it was the War Priest. Yeah. Well, I like that basically the priest in that edition became more focused on the magic so that they didn't just overlap with the damn paladin. Right.
where it was the paladin was a soldier priest, and the cleric was a priest, like a war priest.
Yeah.
Basically a wizard of priestliness.
Sure. And now that we have drifted far afield from minigames, yeah, Miniatures Handbook. There will be links in the description.
Yeah.
So I was cruising around on the tube of views the other day, and I came across an interesting channel.
Okay. You were cruising on the what?
The tube of views.
Oh, okay.
No,
I now know what you mean. I just didn't quite hear you due to the connection, and I'm like, you were what? Yeah. It didn't click. I'm sorry. I ruined your joke.
Everything's over.
That's what I do. I ruin things. Okay, wrap it up. We're out of time.
Everything's over. That's my line. The channel I don't know if you remember, it probably was, I want to say about 4, maybe 5 years ago. There was a video that made the rounds of all the most popular places to go. About this guy who was trying to work on a piece of equipment and kept shocking himself rather terribly.
Okay.
He would like fiddle with something and it would zap him in there, big shower of sparks and all kinds of stuff, and he'd go down or whatever.
A comedy played for laughs here?
That was the thing. I think that's why it got so far around, was you couldn't really tell if he was playing for laughs or if this was really happening to him. Okay.
So we were laughing at him, not with him.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Oh. Okay.
So I happened to come across that video the other day, and I thought to myself, well, what was this guy's story? What was the deal behind him? So I started doing some research. You come to find out he's got an entire channel on YouTube that's been running for years now. And it started with that video.
He's just found other ways to electrocute himself since then?
Well, essentially, he's called it Electro Boom. There will be links. But
sorry.
But
go ahead.
I find it interesting because what happens is he started out with that video and he was zapping himself and zapping himself and zapping himself, and you still can't really tell whether it was intentional or not. He keeps that up for about 6 or 7 videos where things just go wrong. Bits of electronics explode on him. He cross wires things. He short circuits other things. He ends up getting hit with a wad of voltage and all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
But after that point, what happens is he begins to teach you electronics and how it works and what you have to look out for. And the thing of it is, when he gets to a point where there's something you need to be careful of, that's when the accidents happen. So
are the accidents now being staged?
I still don't know.
Huh.
I'm coming to the conclusion, because I've watched his entire selection. I'm coming to the conclusion that the accidents are real, but they're also intentional, so not really accidents.
So he is literally hurting himself for you.
He is.
On purpose.
But he knows what he's doing, because it turns out he's an electrical engineer. So he's not just some amateur. He's an electrical engineer, and he does know what he's doing. Though occasionally he gets it wrong, because he's got more than one video where he has been rather badly burned across the fingers by electricity. Okay. But overall, it's pretty useful. I found it entertaining, if nothing else. And you can sit there and wonder whether he's really doing things or not doing things or whatever. But yeah, he'll blow bits up. He's exploded more than one diode, and the occasional capacitor, and resistors will go poof on him, and all kinds of stuff.
He actually, because I was just going to check it out while you were talking. He's actually got a website, a blog.
Oh yeah, he's got the whole thing going
to
on.
to his production.
Yep, absolutely.
Because I'm actually looking at some of his circuit diagrams here. He was apparently building a microphone amplifier circuit.
Yeah, this is the other thing. He like I said, he's teaching you electronics.
Mm-hmm.
And he's put up a number of schematics that you can follow at home to build some of the same stuff he's built, arguably with more or less success depending on how much attention you pay. But he built his own Tesla coil.
Uh-huh.
You know, he built his own Jacob's ladder. And this is
I just got to the blog entry about where he's making the Jacob's ladder to celebrate a million subs.
Unfortunately, in the video for the Jacob's ladder, he has a genuine accident.
I'm just looking at the thumbnail of the video, though.
The Jacob's ladder is about 20,000 volts of electricity.
Right.
And it accidentally falls over on him, and he catches it in both hands.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Now, he does take precautions. I know that. He has to. Otherwise, he would be a dead man. So I'm fairly certain he's wearing non-conductive shoes so that he's not grounded to anything. Okay? But when that thing comes over, it looks like it genuinely surprises and hurts him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but not fatally, which I think is the key.
I just found it amusing. I'm looking at the thumbnail for the video, and just he's sitting back from it.
Yes.
And he's eyeing it with this look of like he's not afraid of it,
right?
But he's very distrustful of it.
Yeah.
He's weary of it. It's such a great facial expression.
Yeah. So I'm going to link things for you.
Okay.
And for the general public, and you can check these things out. I found them to be entertaining. He's not one of those guys who shoves out a new video every week. All right. There's definitely some consideration going on. Some careful planning and thought goes into it. But I also want to point out the other thing he does with his Patreon.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Because he has a Patreon. The thing he does is he is giving away some very expensive equipment to his Patreon supporters.
Really?
Yes. We're talking like multimeters and oscilloscopes and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm. He's got to have a sponsorship.
Well, he's a lot of things get donated to him.
Okay.
From various people. But I'm telling you, this guy is something else. If nothing, even if you don't have an interest in electronics, you'll be entertained by him. And if you do have an interest in electronics, I'm sure you'll spot flaws. But overall, there's still stuff to learn. And my dad did electronics in the Air Force, and I showed him this guy, and he says, yeah, he's kind of overgeneralizing a bit, but he's mostly correct.
Well, that could also be for his audience, too.
Yeah.
You know.
Anything else we want to talk about today? Because, we're getting, honestly, there's not, it's, I don't know if you can tell or not. We've been at this a while, and honestly, I think we're out of time.